All right, welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg,
I'm at Piscor.
and Ed, we are giving away. I have a box of double comics, and so I pulled a bunch of those. Basically, a USPS flat rate box. I filled it with my doubles.
Who's getting this?
We're gonna send it out to an e-newsletter subscriber. So if you're watching this at home, subscribe to our e-newsletter. There's a link below the video to that. There's going to be a link in the comments eventually. But give us a subscription. You know, it's a way to keep up with what we're working on. It's something we're just starting up, and we'll probably be doing more giveaways.
Yeah, regularly. I have a bunch of inventory, a bunch of hip hop stuff. I have some studio editions that I could get out of my house.
That's true.
There.
You always end up with comps whenever you're making comics, so we have plenty of stuff.
Public Enemy toy sets, all
that
kinds
comes
of
through
stuff.
here.
And the newsletter, you get access to a bunch of secret behind the scenes stuff too that we just can't really publish publicly in any real way, man. So that's like exclusive just for the hardcore, you know.
Absolutely. So with that said, let's flip through some comics.
Let's see what you got, man. So we benefit from cheap real estate here in Pittsburgh, which means that comic shops can have hordes and hordes of back issue boxes, and sometimes every now and again there's a sale where they sell them things for a quarter. And Jim, it looks like
Sometimes I end up with multiple copies, Ed.
you spent about $20 extra.
We get comics from all over the place too. Like some of this stuff is things that I just end up with double copies. You know, friends' comics, my own comics, and then certainly, as you say, some of the back issue bin diving. And so a lot of these are some comics that I just like a lot. Fist of the North Star #1. Fist of the North Star, one of my favorite comics ever. So, you know, probably if you're watching this at home, you're going to see some stuff that's new to you, but probably some stuff that you're familiar with too, and things that we've talked about and looked at in the past. Hardware from the Milestone Comics line, some of the later issues, issue 45 there. So this ran for almost 5 years, I believe.
From doing the channel, so many people have sent us hate comics that you've pretty much almost amassed. Like I have the run myself, so I slid them all to you.
Yes.
And you got enough to have doubles.
Yeah, and I'm happy to recycle these. You know, these are great comics, so I like being able to pass them on to somebody. And I assume if you're watching at home, if you're subscribing to our newsletter, there will be some comics in here that will interest you and that will be new to you. And if you already have some of these, you can pass them on to your friends.
Ooh.
Early Rob Liefeld.
Super early.
Hawk and Dove, issue #1. Some of his first published work for DC Comics. And
Look at him going for it too, man. Drawing more than 3 panels on a page and stuff.
yeah, you wonder how much Carl Kessel, the inker, is responsible for some of this. But you can definitely see his style early on here.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
And a nice, attractive ad for Cosmic Odyssey. Mike Mignola art doing some of the Fourth World characters. Always thought that was a really good fit for Mike Mignola.
When he was starting to look like Mignola.
Romance comics from Vertigo. Interesting lineups of talent. You'll see Tim Bradstreet, Frank Quitely, Tony Salmons. Man, that's a hell of a lineup.
I like that favorite cover.
I was gonna say even the cover starts out strong. Tim Bradstreet we've looked at in the past for his collaborations with Tim Truman. And of course, people know him as a Punisher cover artist. Tony Salmons hasn't done a ton of comics art, but a very good comics artist. Always nice whenever he shows up. And of course, Frank Quitely, one of the more contemporary superhero mainstream artists that I'm a fan of.
Yeah, I like him with body horror. I was sort of wishing he would draw some sort of grossness.
And of course, if you watch the channel, you know I'm a big fan of the 80s black and white stuff. Holy Night #1, Pocket Change Comics. There'll be a few of these kinds of comics scattered throughout. Add in some religion on top of the black and white boom, and I am all in. Also, you'll see some of these early manga. So this is a Dark Horse title. Actually, I believe I posted an image from this on the Cartoonist Kayfabe Instagram a couple of weeks ago and got a nice response. And it was a big robot shot. I think it was this issue. I feel like that stuff's pretty cool looking.
That one might come home with me.
That's true.
I might have to take that one.
Maybe a few of these won't make it into the box. More Christian comics.
I
Jack
have
Chick.
that. Yeah.
He did a series of these things, you know, well known for the Chick tracks, of course, but also full-size comic books. So this one is about the exorcism. These are amazing. The
They
Christian
are.
comics.
They're just so they remind me of like a Ogden Whitney or something, where you just read the whole time like you can't be serious. That's like the thought that's in my mind the entire time. Like, you can't be doing this like for real.
Very, very true. These are the anime adaptations that Viz has published several of these, where I guess it's just film stills from actual anime. I just love how these look.
I do too. I picked up a bunch myself recently, and there's bigger budget when it comes to the production of an anime. So isolating these things, I'm looking forward to reading it to see if it works as a comic.
Yeah, interesting to see how they go about putting a comic together. It's not the same size panels. Obviously, they're cutting and cropping and things. So another one of the 80s black and whites. This one's from 1993. If you didn't know any better, you might have guessed a little bit earlier. It has that aesthetic. Although this reminds me of some Image influence.
Yeah, it's like a Son of Liefeld.
Yes.
Yeah, with that hair, the little wavy hair gimmicks.
She-Wolf number 4. I believe this is here because I have a pinup, I think, in this one.
Oh, so you got a little grip of them.
I do, although I might be wrong and not have one in this issue. She-Wolf is Rich Tommaso, an Image comic. I'm a fan of his, and this is kind of horror comics that he's doing the coloring and everything, so one-man production team. Punch to Kill is one of those, friend of the show sent this in. We made a big deal about it, and we ended up, I think he has sent a couple of boxes of comics and includes this each time, and you can see why we are fans. So I do have an extra of this one, and I thought I would pass that forward to some cartoonist Kayfabe at home who's probably seen us look at this and enjoy it. Darwin Cook, DC's New Frontier. Ed, have you ever read New Frontier?
No.
I have not either, and I have a few loose issues, but I don't have the whole run. I like Darwin Cook's comics that I have read, and this is one that everybody says, kind of maybe his best. So
the art is always on point.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's really nice. So I need to finish my collection of these and sit down and read them because it's definitely a nice one to look at. Early Pacific. This is Neil Adams doing early direct market, creator-owned comics, Ms. Mystic.
I heard he had to quit this one, man, because they ran out of that that Zipatone.
Could be. This is before he goes to continuity and really establishes that house coloring style.
Ran out of it.
I think this stuff looks pretty good. Pretty sharp Neil Adams. Unicycle robot is your enemy.
When he's tasked with doing imagination, it's always like a little goofy.
This is Steve Rude, well known for doing Nexus. And this is one of his spin-off characters, the Moth, and it's written by Gary Martin. This character started out as a Creator Universe card. I think we looked at those at one point on Wizard Magazine. Gary Martin, who inked a lot of Steve Rude, saw the card, liked it, and then basically they worked up this story together. And this is a nice one because it's like a big, thick collection, like 48 pages. I liked this character. I think the reason it didn't catch on is probably the time when it was published. It was a down cycle in comics, but it's a circus acrobat who's in this costume. And Rude is so good at figure art. This guy looks like an acrobat. Like if you see gymnasts or something in the Olympics, they have kind of a stockier build because they're so strong. And he captures that with the Moth. This is New York City Outlaws, Ken Landgraf. This is an autographed copy of issue number 1. It includes the pull-out poster. This is possibly the gem of this collection that I'm including. I had a double of this one. One of my favorite comics. Definitely one of my favorite black and white comics. So I know people are looking for this comic. If you're interested in it, subscribe to our newsletter. That's what we're trying for here. So sign up and get a chance for this. Next wave, Agents of Hate, Warren Ellis and Stuart Immonen. Stuart Immonen, another one of those. I guess he's retired now. I think of him as a contemporary superhero artist and one of the best in my opinion. A real interesting artist. Tim Tyler, Ed.
We're going outlaw.
Tim Tyler, friend of the show. We've looked at his art before. I guess a contemporary of Tim Vigil.
Oh, definitely contemporary.
And does a lot of self-publishing now. So if you're active, if you're a fan of the show, you've probably seen Tim Tyler's name come up and some of his comics cross paths. But he's been in the game for a while, since the 80s, and just doing outlaw comics and slinging ink. Another longtime ink slinger is Optic Nerve's Adrian Tomine. This is one of those, you come across this for a quarter.
Yeah,
I already have it.
Rescue mission.
I want it to go to a good home.
Yeah, rescue mission, we call those.
Yeah, too good of a book to sit in those bins. I end up doing that with a few books. Some of these I accidentally buy doubles up, and some of them I'm just buying them if I come across it for a quarter, 50 cents. One of the most popular alternative cartoonists to come out of like 90s or 2000s. Still active today, still a hell of a cartoonist. Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yes.
Some good stuff in this pile, you know.
Oh,
Bill
definitely.
Sienkiewicz doing New Mutants. I try to, pull a mixture of stuff to, again, if you're a fan of us, you probably have some of this stuff, but I doubt if anybody has most of it. This is an example, one of those. I'm not sure how I ended up with two of them, but
Kirby on Baxter paper.
one of the all-time greats, the double-sized New Gods. These are awesome. This is one of those great collections. Before DC started collecting all the New Gods, this was the New Gods I was able to pick up.
Yeah. I have the Swamp Things in this format where they gang up 2 issues per thing, man, and that was like the accessible Swamp Things that you could get. Same with
Really
this.
interesting. Yeah. These were around, and they're beautifully printed, as you said. Mike Allred and Jay Bone, Mr. Gum. This is Oni Press, but it's kind of part of the AAA Pop when Mike Allred was self-publishing.
Yeah, he was winding it down, man.
I see parallels between Mike Allred and Steve Rude's styles.
Yeah, and a nice bold style. Really good figure drawers.
Yes.
Like when you look at Allred's work, and it's more visible in Madman, but he never draws like just like a straight on view. This is mostly J Boone, it looks like. But the figure is always moving in like a believable way and in a different point of view. It's never that standard like straight on view or side view or anything.
I think both of those guys have a big Jack Kirby influence, but they're very natural in their figure drawing. So it's not obvious at first, but the more I look at their work and the more you get to know those guys, they're big Kirby fans, and that's where you see that twisting and sort of a live.
That part comes from their interest in Andrew Loomis. Andrew Loomis will bring that energy.
This is a Fantagraphics Free Comic Book Day issue. Emil Ferris, my favorite thing is monsters, ballpoint pen drawing. This is one of the most attractive graphic novels I've ever seen. Really great to get a sample of her work. If you're not familiar with this, astounding. It seems like she just showed up one day at comics and was like, look at my masterpiece.
Right.
But again, look at her masterpiece.
And there's the Eric Reynolds shoot interview where this comes up, and it was like a mind-boggling. Like he said that he thought it was somebody's pen name.
Yeah, it's believable. Like if you were just to see a glimpse of this, it could almost pass as Klaus or something. And it could be their shared history in Chicago. I feel like there's a real specific aesthetic that comes out of there with a number of cartoonists. But pretty nice sample of her work if you haven't seen it. Michael Golden. You ever see this Michael Golden story yet?
No.
I don't know if you'll let this one leave. This is one of my favorite Michael Golden stories. I think he's doing color on this as well. And it's dynamic and cartoony, double lighting. Like, he's really going for it. This is a holiday special.
I'm going to have to take that one. Sorry, Kayfabers.
It's only a short story, but it's very fun. This whole story, the idea is it's a kid playing with toys and imagining stuff. So then at the end, you get to see the toy breakdown. But really good
Pass
stuff.
that here.
Leah Hernandez. This is 1986. Leah Hernandez, American cartoonist, but one of the early American cartoonists that was influenced by anime and manga that was doing work. And I guess it's actually dated 87. The cover art has 86 in the signature. But early Leah Hernandez, who we talked about in a Wizard episode about manga.
Yes.
I don't know what this is. There's probably a few of these in my boxes. Legends of Elfenwild, #1. This is 1987, published out of Indiana. So, black and white explosion book. Sandy Weiner, not familiar with.
Somebody said for every issue I take out, I should put one back. Man. Here's a contribution.
Sweet. This is a really nice contribution. Hirohiko Araki, known for JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Yeah, early, maybe his first American licensed series.
Yeah, it's his first regular series of stuff that wasn't like one shots and all that.
This is a cool series. I think it ran 8 issues, and it's about these they've been manipulated by the government, genetically manipulated by the government as basically weapons, super soldiers, and then one of course breaks out, and then the others have to go track them down, and so you get to see that genetic mutation come into effect as they fight each other. And
it's very manageable too. Like 8 issues, man. You could put that together. Worst comes to worst, man. You go to mycomicshop.com. You'll be able to get all the rest of them.
This is Nightwolf #1, signed copy, by the way, everybody. I didn't know that, or this one might not have come with me. I'm joking, of course. But I like this one a lot. Nightwolf is one of these street vigilantes that was so popular in the 80s, but it is a 90s title, so you see a lot of that early image influence in these pages.
Yeah, get your magnifying glass out, man, to read it.
Original Man, Omega 7 Comics. For a brief period of time, this was part of the Anaya collective. I don't know if this issue is part of it or not. But we have looked at them in past Wizard episodes, a very interesting collective from the early 90s. And this is, one of their titles. And you see unusual comics coloring, which is something I appreciate in these self-published comics.
Yeah, if I had a bet too, man, I would bet you that these were drawn on like 8.5 by 11 type of paper.
Yeah, you are probably right about that. And there are a few issues of Original Man out there. Oh, how about this one, Ed?
Yes. When the market corrected itself and everybody was on the Stephen Platt bandwagon, this is the issue that you could get.
Yes. Yeah, shockingly, this is one that I do find from time to time in a quarter bin, and usually end up picking it up and then realize, of course, I already have this copy. But it's Stephen Platt doing Moon Knight, one of the few comics where he's inking himself.
Look at that spread.
The best Stephen Platt. Look at those quads, man. This dude squats like 900 pounds.
McFarlane just did like a drawing demo on his social medias about how to draw legs, man. 4 teardrops in the top part there.
Of course there are, bud. Tim Vigil, man. Speaking about him a minute ago, 1987. This is, I think, the first book that he did after he left Silverwolf.
Super frustrating, too, because this same issue will have, there's 3 covers to this same issue.
I think it's published by a couple different people, or the title changed, because Omen, I think, is what it ends up being called.
Oh, what's this called?
This one is Omega.
Oh, yes, yeah, I have both, man. Fuck.
Yeah. I think North Star does a run of Omen, and I think they had to change the title, maybe. I don't know the particulars, but yeah, this is one that you'll see kind of like versions of this. This is one I don't really have anything to say. Not sure how I came across this. It's just an 80s black and white explosion book.
Yeah.
But I love these, so I end up with doubles of some of them. Martial Law, Kevin O'Neill. Again, interesting coloring. If you're interested in comics production and stuff, not a lot of comics were colored that looked like this.
Yeah.
And this is Kevin O'Neill coloring it himself at this stage. So pretty interesting comics and kind of that revisionist superhero time period and style. And as he always says, the only artist banned by the Comics Code.
For no reason other than they just don't like it.
Right. 1993 is one of those funny years for comics. Like that was that, you have 86 is like the black and white explosion. 93 is kind of that speculator boom. That's when everybody was publishing comics. So you get some really interesting stuff. This is one of those books, from that era, but there's a little bit of money in comics at this point, and so everybody's trying to publish comics.
Chap Yap, Entertainment Weekly article, young rookie stands to make $250,000 his first year in comics. Everybody was chasing that dragon, man.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the black and white boom, the height of that era.
Yeah, this is
see
gorgeous.
A date, but this is, 87 probably something.
I could tell by the paper vintage, yes.
Yes. I may have bought 3 of those, too, by the way. It has that generic quality. Lake Erie Monster. This is John G., one of my longest, probably, friends that I've known in comics forever. Knew him from the Bendis boards, buying mini comics from him off the Bendis boards in, 2000.
Now you're flexing.
Out of Cleveland, by the way. So Lake Erie Monster, being close to Cleveland there. Nice comic, full color. I'm a fan of his comics, and like I said, we go back a long way. So the reason this is here is I have a couple copies of this book. So Junk Culture, Ted McKeever, complete 2-issue miniseries from Vertigo. Love Ted McKeever. Love this time period of Ted McKeever. Did a lot of Vertigo stuff in the 90s. That's what this stuff is. How about that? Spawn ad for the HBO animated series. To give you a timestamp on this, I guess mid-90s. Glimmer Man.
Yeah, man. Keenan, when he shaved the head, when he finally committed.
Oh, jeez. That's a pay-per-view ad.
Wow.
Yeah, if you don't know Ted McKeever, somebody is getting lucky with this. Jade Man Collection. These were Hong Kong comics.
Yeah, Manhua.
And most of them are... Tony Wong takes credit for all of them. You know, he's sort of the Stan Lee, I guess, maybe of this stuff, because they were publishing a lot of books at their height, and it couldn't have been the work of just one guy. But Tony Wong's the you know, kind of like the guy that's associated with this stuff.
The crazy thing
far
is,
as I
though,
know.
they all did look the same.
That is true.
So, like, I couldn't tell any real style variations. He got in trouble for plagiarism.
Is that what it was? I know he got in trouble for something.
I think so.
This is this series is interesting to me because like a lot of what they do, Blood Sword, Oriental Heroes, shit. Like I said, there's about 6 titles that I think of with Jade Man. The Jade Man collection. This is book 3. It's kind of like an anthology, and there are some that don't look like quite the same. You know, like this is more of a cartoony style.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for Jademan comics and you want something a little different, this is the title to get is Jademan Collection. However, the great thing with the Jademan comics, one, the coloring is, you know, it's like this airbrush kind of a very different looking color treatment for 80s comics. But
This
the action stuff is really dynamic.
Yeah, this stuff always blew my mind. Whenever it would just,
Yeah.
it would be like arbitrary a lot of times when it would just like cut into a scene where he decides to like paint something.
Yeah, it's strange because I don't know what this is like a gray wash, but it's printed in a color.
Yeah.
And if you look like these speed lines, those are like color holds, right? They're printing
Totally.
them in magenta. Like that is just probably black and white art, but printed in color. And it gets really strange there where the foreground figure seems to be done that way with
Yeah,
like
and
color
look, there's
holds.
overprinting and stuff, man. Like setting these files up.
That's a pretty wild image.
Yeah, that's sick. Setting these files up for the printer must have been a nightmare. And look at ones that like
Yeah,
don't
some
work.
don't work.
It's like
Look at how cool that is.
he figured out a trick and is just like going to use it to death, man.
But the J-Man comics are well worth a look if you're not familiar with them. A couple issues of the Hulk. I think this is a McFarlane
Oh, definitely.
issue.
I got this up off the rack, dude. I was like
wow.
5 years old, man. Still have it.
That's amazing. Rick Parker lettered so many of McFarlane's works. He did a lot of the Spider-Man stuff too. Always like to see Rick Parker's names in these credits. This stuff I found a run of these recently, and I had some, and then so I had a couple doubles. This is one of my all-time favorite Hulk issues and fill-in issues. This was my first exposure to Sam Keith. Bought it off the newsstand.
We'll do this as a show until at some point because
Yeah.
it's worth going through and talking about like page after page, man. There's a lot of cool stuff there.
There really is. There were this version of the Hulk was like no Hulk I had seen up to this point. So definitely one that we'll check out again. Paul the Samurai picked this up on a mailbag episode not too long ago. Ed already had it.
Dang.
So there's a couple comics in here that I'll take home and not remember if I have them or not. And when you find out you do, they may be coming to more e-newsletter subscribers and future giveaways. All right. The Jam, Bernie Moreau. I think he is a French Canadian.
I'm not sure, but this was one of my first like 50 comics, thanks to my eclectic uncle who would
I
just
like
buy
the
weird
Jam.
shit. Me too.
I have a lot of Jam, and the Jam went through a million publishers.
Like
At
every
least
publisher.
3 or 4 publishers published multiple issues of the Jam. It's a fun series. It is indie alternative superheroes, so not exactly revisionist superheroes, but like the first one I got, he's staking out looking for crime, on a building rooftop and like eating a sandwich that he packed. Might not sound like much now, but it was a lot at the time. I going from X-Force to that was very eye-opening. Josie and the Pussycats, Dan DeCarlo, early comics, and a skateboard comic. Dan DeCarlo's easy cartoonist to read, and these Josie comics are a lot of fun. The Archie comics, everybody looks for the Harry Lucy's, so there are pockets of these kinds of comics out there that are worth your time and worth tracking down. Prey is part of the Fantagraphics Monster Comics line, and this is Troy Nixie. Pretty early Troy Nixie. Look at that, man.
I'm gonna take that one. They could have.
Oh man, this is great.
Yeah, they could have a pineapple army.
This is really awesome. Naoki Urasawa, first American imported work, I believe.
Of his, yeah.
These are really good too because they're like standalone short stories.
Yes.
Very easy to read. I think there's 10 issues total. This is issue 2, but doesn't matter what issue it is. Very easy to read because it is a self-contained issue.
Great covers on those things.
So I threw in some of my Adventure Time comics. These are comics that I drew some of. This one is not, but has some of my work in it somewhere. So we were talking about including some doubles. This is from some of my story, and I did several issues of this, a whole story arc. So I have doubles, and they are going in the box. Tim Truman Scout, issue number 2.
Yes.
I always think this is one I'd like to bind, like get all the Scout issues. And the reason is I passed up the entire run of Scout, Scout War Shaman, and like the 2 spin-off miniseries, Guns of whatever those series are. Passed them all up for a quarter because I knew I had most of them. And then afterwards I was like, that would have been the perfect thing to bind into like a 40-issue big hardcover homemade book.
Yeah.
So I do have some doubles, but man, look at how great this is.
Let me ask you this, man. Do you like your Scout with pupils or without pupils?
I don't know. I think I probably like him with pupils, but I don't have a strong feeling on it, Ed. This is like the X-Men superpower eyes, right? But I do like my Scout with gunships in it.
He is so fucking good, man.
Really good. Great silhouettes, too. Always really good at silhouettes. I always associated those with the Kubert School because of that Bart Sears wizard installation about silhouettes, but then you see it, you know? And, like, that's the kind of silhouettes you don't see a lot. They're kind of unassuming, but it makes for a really nice panel. He's awesome. We need to talk to him at some point.
Yeah, I think we could arrange that.
Ron Wimberly did 2 issues of She-Hulk. I am a fan of Ron Wimberly's drawing. Prince of Cats would be a big book of his that the people might know him from. But he did these 2 fill-in issues. I think he colored one of them, possibly this one. And he does this foreshortening stuff that reminds me of Aeon Flux.
Yeah.
He does it more in some of his work than others. You know, like he's an artist that's always seems to be looking and growing. So from book to book, they change quite a bit. But to me, this one is just, it's beautiful color. And then like some of the action stuff and foreshortening is just really strong. Like, good stuff. I had both of those and didn't realize it. I knew I had one of them, but it turns out I had already bought both of them. Shatter. We talked about Shatter briefly when we were looking at early computer comics. This one is not Mike Saints, I don't believe. I think he left after issue 2 and then maybe came back later on.
Convince some other motherfucker to use a mouse on a 1984 Macintosh?
Maybe. Some of this stuff I think is kayfabe.
Yeah,
Because I don't know how you're doing this. You know, like it's almost impossible the way he worked. I don't know that you could just plug in another artist, but also I don't know exactly how they're doing this either. So this is a fun comic, weird bit of history with that one. Scorpio Rose, Eclipse Comics, who dominates the 80s alternative indie publishing scene. This is 1983. I didn't realize it was that early, but this is Marshall Rogers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that in Coyote 11, when Todd McFarlane makes his debut, he does Scorpio Rose backups
Really?
in Coyote. He doesn't draw Coyote, but it's Scorpio Rose backups.
Pretty wild coloring in this. The 80s color comics that weren't Marvel and DC always would use other techniques. It was like a way, I think, to try to look better.
They tried to sell it like Baxter paper was a sales mechanism, and the color reacted differently on there. And
look at the color and production going on in this panel.
yeah, it never caught on. Like, yeah, that's all fucked up. It like computer kind of, it was bleeding edge, and it never, like, nobody worked with it enough to master it.
Yeah.
And because computer comes right after. This is really awesome.
Yeah, I was looking to see who this is. Marshall Rogers, also lettering by Adam Kubert. So it might have been a very young Adam Kubert in 1983. I mean, we hear stories about him lettering when he's 13
12,
or
yeah.
whatever. This could have been that time. Jeff Darrow, Shaolin Cowboy. This is one of those I always pick up for a quarter. Always. He does this wraparound technique
Yes.
of silhouettes. I love these. These are sometimes my favorite part of these Shaolin Cowboys, and he's done it now in however many issues. This is that super long fight scene where it's all 2 panels per spread, and
Perfect
Yeah.
use of the Jeff Darrow aesthetic.
yeah, wild stuff. Poison Elves, Drew Hayes. Can't believe I have a double of this issue, but sure enough, I think I might own 2 Poison Elves comics, and apparently it's the same one. And this is a guy that we hear mentioned a lot in the Wizard issues. You know, one of the self-publishers at the time, pretty strong silhouettes there. I haven't read Poison Elves. You know, I don't know too much about it, but it was in my doubles pile, so it's one that we hear from Kayfabers about from time to time. Jordy Bernay.
Torpedo.
Exactly. Did a lot of DC work in the 2000s. He did this. He did a bunch of Hex issues.
It's so interesting to know that too, because the Torpedo stuff is how most of us like get introduced to his work,
Right.
and you just assume that it's like a vestige of like the 50s or something based on the subject matter and like how convincing he is at drawing that stuff.
Yeah, he's a great artist. There was a book that came out in the early 2000s that was like an overview of him. And after that is when he starts working at DC, which seems weird because at that point it seemed like, he had a whole career under his belt. But great black and white art, European artist, great black and white artist. And these solo issues are amazing. Like, these are ones that I always pick up, and then I don't remember which ones I have, so I do end up with doubles. Richard Corben, self-publishing as Fanagore Press. I think I have the complete run of Son of Mutant, or
Yeah, son.
Son of Mutant World. These are incredible, and we're just going to do something on Fanagore Press at some point, because I'm so impressed with these. Some of the books that he publishes are in color. This one, obviously, black and white.
Yeah, I got a color one right there. Like, you see the
Yeah.
Turtles book? Like, I think that's just Mutant World.
Oh, you know what? It's Catalan. Yeah. This is a nice book.
Yeah.
This is a really nice book. But he ends up publishing both new and republishing older stuff as Fanagore. His own publishing company, Den. You can see an ad here that shows some of the other comics that he publishes, and we'll get into it because I like the
Rip in Time
design.
is another good one.
It's just really interesting, and some of the editorial stuff that he writes in the letters page is very insightful as to like what's going on with him in the mid '80s. A bunch of Harbinger. I don't have much to say about it. Thank you for taking these, whoever ends up with them. Man, I always look at Razor to try, that's one of those books that I think should be good. It ran forever. You would expect it to be kind of outlaw in nature. And I don't find very many good ones. If somebody's watching at home and has a recommendation of what Razor you should get, I'd
Just
be
a
curious.
cash grab.
But I do have one fill-in. That's like a photo comic.
Fumetti.
Or like a penthouse, like send in the pictures of your wife or whatever.
Some beaver hunt.
Yeah, like all bad lighting and stuff. I have one fill-in issue of that we're gonna have to look at. That really does stand up to what I expect out of an outlaw comic. Punisher Armory, Volume 5. Ed, these I think I've said before, the weirdest things Marvel may have ever published. Elliot R. Brown is the guy that I always associate with these, and it's just drawings of equipment and then like his Punisher's diary entries about what they are. Did you get this book when you were a kid?
I did, man, and it like
Rockets and stuff.
it sort of corresponded with the stuff we were drawing anyways, man. Like we were just drawing pages of cool weapons and stuff.
Right. I loved it, man. I bought the shit out of these. There are like 20 of them.
That's the crazy thing because I had no idea about that.
Giant machine gun and the building all shot to hell. They would often have the great covers too. Like the early issues would often have Jim Lee covers that would always be really cool.
Approved by the Comics Code Authority, in case you were wondering.
Oh, man. Wow. Shuriken number 7. This is the original series published by Victory. I love their logo. I
Yeah.
think about bootlegging that into a t-shirt sometimes. Just make one of them for myself. There it is, nice and big.
There it is.
Reggie Byers, the creator. This one, guest artist, writer, Michio Okamura. I would not have known that just flipping through. Like, that looks like Reggie Byers to me, but maybe the figure work a little bit different. This is one of my favorite of the 80s black and white series. One of my favorite of, like, the ninja comics that I collect. And, like everything else, had a couple doubles. Ooh, do you know this one? Stormwatch 47? The splash page. All splash page Jim Lee issue.
Ah, nice.
We may have looked at this. We did the splash page episode, so this is probably one that we looked at. Not the best splash page issue. Like some of the stuff's a little on the generic side, but still, it's Jim Lee doing the all splash page issue. Those things are pretty rare and special. Slash number 1 from North Star, horror comics publisher out of Chicago. James O'Barr with your lead story.
Nice.
A little bit of a different look for James O'Barr. Looks like washes, which you don't see that often. Very distinct eyes, though. You definitely recognize
Definitely.
those as James O'Barr-esque. The eyes and the cheekbone could be right out of The Crow. Chainsaw to the face. I just have to flip through here because you never know who else is in here. Mark A. Nelson is the guy who did the first Alien series for Dark
I like his
Horse.
work a lot.
I do too.
He did like the Brutes and Babes kind of feature and Hero Illustrated, and I was really into his stuff.
I am down with both of those ads. I'm happy with either of those.
Kelly Jones portfolio.
More James O'Barr here, wrapping it up.
You know what? Like, just seeing this, because like this is Zeitgeist thing.
Yeah,
He
that
fucking
thing has been printed
a
half
million
dozen
times.
different books.
And when you see that, you take a look at who the publisher is of this. Let's see. I guess it's not on the indicia. I'll save it then. I'll save it. I won't speculate until we have the name in stone.
It's funny to me to see like this book and then Kelly Jones, who goes on to be a very mainstream Batman artist, because there was a lot of stuff North Star published that I would not think of as mainstream friendly.
Yeah. Azzarello was editor-in-chief for a while.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mirage Run, book 34.
This is Rich Head and Tom McQueenie, the guys who did Roach Mill.
Exactly.
Did their little tour at Mirage Studios, and this is beautiful cartooning, man.
Yeah, it's really nice. Good stuff.
Bouncy.
He's fun. Roach Mill's a fun book to flip through.
I love it. I see it. It's like a son of like the Wally Wood Super Duper Man kind of vibe. He
Nice
abides
lettering.
by that lighting.
Yeah. Strange Haven, Gary Spencer Millage. This was somebody who I would associate with like Dave Sim and the Spirits of Independence, the self-publishing of the 90s.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I would go with this. This is 1995, issue number 1. I would also see it compared to like David Lynch and Twin Peaks as being, you know, kind of a weird headspace where this takes place. He had I don't know how photo referenced this is. I think as the series goes on, it becomes a little more clear that he's photo referencing some stuff. So he had a somewhat photorealistic look that I think a lot of fans really enjoyed. That's what I would see described when I'd see reviews of this somewhere. And it ran for a while.
Real stiff looking.
Several collections worth of this. How about this is a classic? Stark Future.
Really good looking Aircell book, man.
And they're marketing to me with putting the 1986 right on the cover there for me. But this is your peak of black and white. Boom. This is when I started buying the black and white books. This was one of the first ones I got.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. That's like that pose.
Very
He's
much.
just put the skull in his hand.
Very much. David Day is part of the creative team here.
Makes sense, man.
And this is Aircell, Barry Blair, editor-in-chief, but I don't think creatively he's doing anything on this issue.
I don't think he does work on most of the Stark Futures. I think it's pretty independent.
I like this font. It's so
Classic
of that
80s,
time.
yeah. Yeah, I have some Letra sets of that.
Yeah, fun stuff. It's funny, too, with these 80s books, you have no idea how long they run. This thing runs like 20 issues.
It does, yep.
That's a long one. Another Rich Tommaso, Spy Seal. This is one of my favorite Rich Tommaso comics. This is an Image title. Very influenced by something like Hergé's Tintin.
Yeah.
And very European feeling. I like funny animals and stuff. So it's an adventure comic, spy comic. And I think his stuff looks good. So, Spider-Man Fever, Brendan McCarthy, the main creative guy on here. Writing and drawing and coloring, as far as I know, Steve Cook. I guess Steve Cook is credited there as colors and letters with Brendan McCarthy. So they're doing some sort of collaboration on those two things.
Yeah, you could tell that's McCarthy palette.
Yeah,
You know
anybody
what?
that's unfamiliar with McCarthy, you know, is known for these like day glow colors and almost a painterly approach of really using color in ways that a lot of comics weren't doing. This is 2000s, but like he was doing this in the 80s, pre-digital, and it was just mind melting.
I feel like you could see where the division of labor is with the color.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I could see the other dude's color.
Yeah, this was that kind of strange time period where Marvel was bringing in a lot of interesting artists. Like this is all Brendan McCarthy
Yeah.
coloring, I would imagine. Yeah, 2010, a little bit later than I expected, but interesting artist, and it's kind of weird that he's doing Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. And then Spawn, Todd McFarlane.
Classic issue, man.
What are we going to see in here, Ed?
You're gonna see Chapel get his face ripped off, but you don't know that it's his face getting ripped off because the nose is still there. Like,
That's a really dopey shaft. Like, there's something wrong with that shaft.
yeah, I think he's cutting promos. I think he's cutting promos, but let's.
I think he had something to do that day and had to get done quick.
So this is where we discover that Shaft is the guy that killed.
Chapel.
Yeah, Chapel's the guy who killed Al Simmons. They have their little schmoz, and then it's actually terrible storytelling.
Shocking.
Because it's like the hand, and then what happened is the hand. It's on the face. It's off panel. The bad stuff that happens, and then you see the face, and then this is supposed to be the skull. But there's a nose. It's a, let your imagination do the work.
Got to fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, and the teeth just all of a sudden got sharp. He tried.
Yeah.
Noble effort.
And always the fan art section.
Really good. How about that, man? That's awesome.
Yeah, these are funny.
So some Kayfabers get in this box, man. We're gonna announce the winner or whatever on the next Kayfabe Weekly, man. So you have some time to get your entry in, like sign up for that Kayfabe newsletter.
Yeah, man. Links below the video to that sign up, and like I said, we'll pin one in the comments as well. But if you see this video, if you're interested in these comics, sign up for the e-newsletter.
Yeah, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel since we're trying to get that 15,000 mark. Get out of here, Jimmy.
That's all I have.
Give those marching orders and let's get the F out.
Read more comics.